But
Keep it in. Keep it in.
yeah. Before the Fellowship was
I'm
the greatest
Dan.
story. What?
I didn't want to forget saying my name. I always forget to say my name after you.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Here,
I'll hold it.
I'll give
hold
you
it.
a signal when it's your
Okay,
turn.
give me the signal. Okay, I'll
Before
mute
the
myself.
Fellowship
again.
was the greatest story you've never heard. I'm Cameron.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Greg.
Join us as we read and react to the Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. Last time we read about Feänor, one of the great princes of the Eldar and a key figure in the story of the Silmarillion. Today we continue chapter 6 of Quenta Silmarillion, and I'm on page 65 of the second edition. Now, even while Feänor and the craftsmen of the Noldor worked with delight, foreseeing no end to their labors, and while the sons of Indis grew to their full stature, the noontide of Valinor was drawing to its close. For it came to pass that Melkor, as the Valar had decreed, completed the term of his bondage, dwelling for 3 ages in the duress of Mandos alone. At length, as Manwë had promised, he was brought again before the thrones of the Valar. Then he looked upon their glory and their bliss, and envy was in his heart. He looked upon the children of Ilúvatar that sat at the feet of the mighty, and hatred filled him. He looked upon the wealth of bright gems, and he lusted for them. But he hid his thoughts and postponed his vengeance. Before the gates of Valmar, Melkor abased himself at the feet of Manwë and sued for pardon, vowing that if he might be made only the least of the free people of Valinor, he would aid the Valar in all their works, and most of all in the healing of the many hurts that he had done to the world. And Nienna aided his prayer, but Mandos was silent. Then Manwë granted him pardon. But the Valar would not yet suffer him to depart beyond their sight and vigilance, and he was constrained to dwell within the gates of Valmar. But fair seeming were all the words and deeds of Melkor in that time, and both the Valar and the Eldar had profit from his aid and counsel, if they sought it. And therefore in a while he was given leave to go freely about the land, and it seemed to Manwë that the evil of Melkor was cured. For Manwë was free from evil and could not comprehend it. And he knew that in the beginning, in the thought of Ilúvatar, Melkor had been even as he. And he saw not to the depths of Melkor's heart, and did not perceive that all love had departed from him forever. But Ulmo was not deceived, and Tulkas clenched his hands whenever he saw Melkor his foe go by. For if Tulkas is slow to wrath, he is slow also to forget. But they obeyed the judgment of Manwë, for those who will defend authority against rebellion must not themselves rebel. Now in his heart Melkor most hated the Eldar, both because they were fair and joyful, and because in them he saw the reason for the arising of the Valar, and his own downfall. Therefore all the more did he feign love for them and seek their friendship. And he offered them the service of his lore, and labor in any great deed that they would do. The Vanyar indeed held him in suspicion, for they dwelt in the light of the trees and were content. And to the Teleri he gave small heed, thinking them of little worth, tools too weak for his designs. But the Noldor took delight in the hidden knowledge that he could reveal to them, and some hearkened to the words that it would have been better for them never to have heard. Melkor indeed declared afterwards that Feänor had learned much art from him in secret, and had been instructed by him in the greatest of all his works. But he lied in his lust and his envy. For none of the Eldalie ever hated Melkor more than Feanor, son of Finwë, who first named him Morgoth. And snared though he was in the webs of Melkor's malice against the Valar, he held no converse with him and took no counsel from him. For Feanor was driven by the fire of his own heart only, working ever swiftly and alone. And he asked the aid and sought the counsel of none that dwelt in Aman, great or small, save only and for a little while of Nerdanel, the wise, his wife. So, recap. Melkor's sentence of 3 ages imprisoned comes to an end. He appeals for freedom, vowing falsely to assist the Valinor in repairing the hurts he caused. Melkor succeeds in deceiving Manwë, because Manwë can't understand the depths of evil and how deep it might go. And he's released in a sort of probationary period in which he cannot leave Valinor. Melkor does not deal with the Vanyar or Teleri, but he wins the trust of the Noldor, aiding them and sharing hidden knowledge. And Feanor, above all, hates Melkor and is the first to call him Morgoth.
That was a lot for a short reading. There's a lot packed in there.
A tight 6 minutes. That's
Yeah,
right.
can you give a recap of the recap so I can digest it a bit more?
I do have a thought that was related to something we talked about last time. We talked a little bit about Aman as a place of bliss. And there is something interesting here. This is right at the beginning, the first paragraph you read. It says that Melkor looked upon the glory and bliss of the people there, both the Valar and the elves there, and envy was in his heart. So there was something good. I mean, it was good there. It was like a bliss, even if there were flaws in it, or there were kind of some chips in that, or some seeds for bad things to happen. At that time, it was blissful, and that's part of what kept that evil in Melkor's heart, in his Grinch-like heart.
I'm curious it's beautiful how it's described that Manwë cannot comprehend the evil that's in Melkor. Because in the beginning, it was Melkor and Manwë, like brother and brother, created by Ilúvatar. He cannot comprehend, even after all this, all his repentance, his imprisonment, him, turning back, it seems, that he could still have evil in his heart. But what's interesting is Ulmo and Tulkas are not deceived by it. So I'm wondering what Ulmo and Tulkas have. I mean, Tulkas is understandable because he just wants to pummel, Melkor whenever he sees him,
and laugh,
and that'll never change. But Ulmo, there's a wisdom about him where he, Manwë sees farther than anyone, perceives all things, in Middle Earth, but Ulmo seems to have a wisdom about him. I'm not saying he's wiser than Manwë, but the fact that he's not deceived by him is interesting.
Yeah, he's not wiser. He's different. I guess we have to. These are beings that are beyond us, or they're supposed to be. So we can only relate in the ways that we can relate. And I think that maybe I'm overthinking this, but most of us can think of somebody who we know in our lives who's pretty innocent. Like, if you've read the Brothers Karamazov, you have Alyosha, right? Who can't really conceive of evil in his mind. He's just very innocent, right? Whereas his brothers are really sophisticated and complicated. And not only can they conceive of evil, but they think it out and think out the possibilities and path out the most logical kind of way. So I conceive of it as like that.
It kind of reminded me of Titus. What is it? Titus 1:12 or something, or 1:15. It says, "To the pure, all things are pure." There's something about Manwë that's like, he is pure in a certain way, that innocent, like you said, where he just can't even conceive these evil things. Like it's surprising to him, even though, I mean, I think you brought up when Melkor was first in prison, isn't he just going to sit in there and get more angry for 3 ages? You know? But for Manwë, he can't even conceive of that possibility.
But with Ulmo, his perception goes to the depths of the waters, and since the waters kind of cover the earth, that he's probably seen and heard things that Manwë hasn't heard.
Actually, this kind of goes back to what we were discussing last time, where the concept of, okay, so when evil came in, it was at first a music that was kind of discordant, and then that led to a sorrow that was produced by the rest of the Aina. That wasn't necessarily bad in of itself. It was a new good, we called it. But we're talking about the origins of kind of good and evil in this mythos, and we have sort of Melkor's bad, but then we have the highest of the Valar, right? And each of them have complicated characters. Some of them are innocent. Manwë seems to just be this kind of pure, innocent being, and the others are a little bit more like Tulkas, who's just like, I'll get you, and wants to punch him in the face, as Cameron said. And Ulmo, who's like, yeah, I'm not falling for that BS. Like, there's a difference of their the way that they perceive the world, and you think that maybe Ulmo, in the depths of his kind of lonely wanderings in the sea, that he might have thought of going off on his own. I mean, I think it almost implies that earlier on, that he loved to be alone and spend time away and only come back kind of when necessary. And Tulkas, who's a fighter, a warrior, he has probably been in battles that aren't wholly pure in spirit, clean from death. He's acquainted with these kinds of things. So there's even a complexity in the Valar. There's a complexity in the elves, and then as we get lower and lower and lower, we see in the men there's a great complexity because they struggle for power, and then ending with these creatures called hobbits, which are just an enigma because they're not really troubled by these kinds of things.
I find it interesting that Feanor is immune to Melkor's words. Feanor is many things, but he's not gullible or naive. And, he takes, he doesn't take counsel from anyone. So when Melkor is using his smooth words to win over all the Noldor, doesn't work on Feanor, I think that's interesting because Feanor is driven by his own heart only. So he kind of dodges that, which is really good.
It kind of reminds me of, it's kind of like the hobbits, right? They, in a sense, they're immune to the workings of the Ring of Power because they're not powerful. Or even more so, Tom Bombadil is even less, he's more immune to the Ring of Power because he just has no interest in those kinds of things.
Yeah,
he's
at the
earthly matters.
Of Rivendell, they say, why don't we give it to Tom Bombadil? And Gandalf is like, this is in the book. He says, not that he couldn't handle it, but he would just forget about it. He would just, he would lose it. He'd leave it somewhere, and it would, those who don't want power for themselves, power has no hold on them.
Yeah, that's something I did find interesting in Lord of the Rings. Really, in the end, Bilbo is the only character in the whole story who freely gives up the Ring of Power. It's not taken from him. Sam, and there is something about that, kind of
Sam also.
lowness. Huh?
Sam also. Samwise, he was a ring bearer for a
that's
time.
right. That's right. He does.
Yeah.
So these particularly lowly, humble figures who have this sort of immunity to the influence of the Ring of Power.
Yeah, I didn't mean to correct you there, but actually I think it strengthens your point that there's like
Yeah, it does, I think.
like
Yeah.
there's a certain type of spirit, let's just say, like meaning the demeanor of a creature, that is immune to this sort of power struggle, which isn't true for all hobbits. Okay, Smeagol wasn't a hobbit, right? He was something that preceded hobbits by several hundred years.
Harfoot?
Was he actually a Harfoot? Was he a Harfoot?
No, he's like a river folk.
He was river. Yeah, okay, so river folk. Which, by the way, I come from a place called Sonning-on-Thames, and it's in England, and it's by the River Thames. And next to Sonning is a town called Woodley, and it's a small, like, town. And I have friends who live there, and we live in Sonning, so they call us river folk. And in a like a negative kind of way. So it's just a funny kind of thing. But the people in Sonning they are river folky, and I could see them like wanting to steal the ring too. But Smeagol he's not tempted by power. He's tempted by Matham, which, if you know your Lord of the Rings lore, Mathams are just these kind of useless, precious items that hobbits find good, like, in of themselves. Most of the hobbits just give them freely, but they collect them and hoard them. Smeagol, like, obviously,
but it is the Ring of Power.
It is the Ring of Power, yes. But was he
it's a
tempted?
power that makes you impotent. That's kind of the effect of it. But he wants it. It makes
he
him powerless.
he ends up wanting it for the power reasons. But in the original, like, it's his birthday present. Like, it's my birthday today. I should get the shiny, nice thing. I mean, yes, it does grow into, like, he realizes, wow, it gives him power and long age and the rest of it. But I think in the beginning, right? Am I not right here? In his initial attraction to it is super superficial.
Superficial.
Yeah.
On season 14 of this show, we'll probably get to that. Where we're
okay, so I'm
reading
wrong.
Lord of the Rings.
Oh, okay. So
Well, bringing it back to Feanor, though, you're right, Cameron.
I'm excited to be wrong. Okay.
He is he's
troll
he's just
me
not
in season 14.
No, you're probably right.
the actually what Feanor experiences, where he's kind of not interested in what Melkor's doing. That's kind of how I see what happens with the Vanyar. It describes how Melkor, he wants to get back at the elves, so he kind of looks at like all three of the groups and says like, the Vanyar, they're kind of suspicious of him too because they're close to the Valar. And I kind of imagine that playing out, like him trying to tempt them, like, look at these gems I found, and like, yeah, we've got some gems, we're good. And he's like, all right, I'm done with you. I'm gonna go check out the Teleri, and they're like kind of too weak for him to care.
Yeah.
So then he really hones in on the Noldor and trying to
Passed over in their humility, maybe.
perhaps.
Okay, is there something that is Gollum-like about Melkor's abasing himself at the feet of Manwë, suing for pardon, vowing that if he might be made only least of the free people of Valinor, he would aid the Valinor in all their works, and most of all in the healing of the many hurts that he has done to the world? Is there not something that is an echo in
A little bit.
Gollum to Frodo?
there's not.
I think he has control. Like I think he's not pitiful like Gollum is. He's more like, how do I get what I want? I need to say these words in this way.
I think that's what Gollum does. I've always read it as Gollum knowing he's not. He's trying to buy time. I always read it as Gollum trying to buy time.
Interesting.
He like when he kind of nice master, like all of this kind of stuff. For the most part, except for the times that Frodo does show him true mercy. Samwise does not ever. Samwise is like more like Melkor and Tulkas, who kind of sees through. Not Melkor, sorry, Tulkas and Olmo, who's not deceived by Smeagol, right? Though the difference between Melkor and Smeagol, obviously, or Gollum, is that Melkor is pure evil and there is no redemptive arc, right? But with Smeagol, Gollum, there's this double nature to him.
Mm-hmm.
Where there's Gollum, who is just basically pure evil, but then there's Smeagol, who there's a memory of something that once was.
Mm-hmm.
But I just see that part, like there's an echo of sorts there.
Yep.
Yeah, you're right. I was too quick to say no.
Well, this will be good because there'll be a debate in the comment section somewhere.
It is though. It is. I mean, but it is. I do think like earnestly, I'm saying. I mean, like there's a difference between Melkor, who is this kind of pure evil, and Smeagol, who is this corrupted good. You know, but even then, Melkor was he was an Ainur who was made good originally, but we don't really ever hear about him being good. He's pretty much evil from the start.
Twice the pride, double the flaw, said Harry Potter. Wasn't it Harry Potter who said that?
I don't know.
Oh, no, but this is a Lord of the Rings podcast.
Oh, okay. I think I was quoting Star Wars, actually.
Oh, yeah.
No, Star Trek.
Star Trek. Oh, Spaceballs.
Star Trek. Yeah, Spaceballs.
What was I gonna say? Oh, I think Melkor has a command over his desire and like he sees everyone as a tool. Like it even uses the word tool. So like if you can possibly imagine, you know, having no love, having all love departed from you, and you just see everyone as a tool to be used for your purposes. That's what Melkor is. Like he's just like playing chess with people and trying to get what he wants. And so when he's
you're an average politician.
Yeah.
Well, in some ways he's like Feanor in that way, right? Feanor is the one who he didn't want just to understand other minds. He wanted to master them.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they're similar in that way.
So he's just secretly in his own heart, even when he's groveling, he's just laughing.
Yeah. He's like, what are the words I need to say? Where should I put my head to look, you know, more abased?
Just for fun, what do you think his laughter on the inside sounds like?
Probably like, wait, that sounded like Santa Claus.
Oh, yeah, exactly. He's like an evil Santa Claus. Satan Claus.
Can I highlight two quick little things?
Yeah.
We don't need to talk about them, but
yes.
they're just interesting to me. One is when Melkor says, falsely, he says, I will heal the hurts that I've caused. Nienna is on board with that and tries to assist him because that's who she is.
That's who she is, right?
But then Mondos is just silent because that's who he is. There's like this conflict, and he waits until it's his turn to declare his doom. I love that he just inserted those two like short little sentences, just kind of helping us recall like these are who some of the Valar are.
The other thing I love is how Ulmo and Tulkas like disagree with the council, but they don't disobey it.
Yes, that was the other thing I wanted to bring up. That line there
in their hearts. Yeah.
It says, but they obeyed the judgment of Manwë. For those who will defend authority against rebellion must not themselves rebel.
Yes. So like America. USA.
There was that big upset the other day where
you drew with us.
Yeah, where we tied with
Did you see last
England.
time US drew with England? The New York Times said big win for the USA.
It was a
And
big
it was
win
a
for the
tie.
USA.
Wait, when people
it was a
watch
big win.
this in 2 years, what are you guys talking about?
We're talking about a World Cup, and if you don't know that, then that's okay, because we're actually really talking about Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion. So that's your
A
prerogative.
nice way to say it. Well, if you like the World Cup, go ahead and rate us 3 Silmarils out of 3. Next episode,
We find out who wins in the World Cup.
Next episode, we find out who wins, and we get introduced to the Silmarils. It's gonna be really exciting. Follow us everywhere at Before the Fellowship, and send any comments or questions to beforethefellowship@gmail.com.
That was
Join
a
us next
spoiler.
week as we read the greatest story you've never heard, The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien.